Good morning. Welcome to Newday Saturday edition. My name is Abna Tebi. Once again, a very good morning to you and welcome. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. Some showers received this morning and we are grateful for that. Today on the show, quite a number of interesting topics to be looked at, but we will be running through the topics and then we will come back to, dig deep into these matters. We're coming to you live from the studios of TV3 here in Accra. We're also live on 3FM 92.7 and we're streaming live online around the world at 3news.com, also on our Facebook page TV3 Ghana. We will encourage you to send through your comments, remarks, whatever it is you have to share regarding the topics that I'll be outlining very soon to our WhatsApp number 050060770, and we will share them with the rest of the world. So what are we looking at this morning? And as you would know, we'll definitely touch on the Ghana-US Defense Cooperation Agreement. And yes, it is still in the news. It's actually dominating that space. Now, it doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. Now, this week, the heat around this discussion was perhaps turned up a notch when the president waded into the debate with his national address on the matter. And this address was telecast on Thursday to the entire nation. Now, his address lasted some 15 to 16 minutes, and in those minutes, the president touched on some of the thorny issues surrounding this agreement. Now, the question is, does or should the president's address on the matter bring closure to this matter? Or we just got started with the president coming in to the matter with his address? And if we just got started, question is, to what end? Especially when we know that this agreement has been ratified by Parliament. Do we terminate the agreement in accordance with the provisions of the agreement, which is to give a year's notice? And if that's the case, what do we do in that 1 year notice period? Or do we request an amendment in line with the provisions of the agreement, which amendment would have to be agreed by both parties to become valid? Now, these are some of the questions agitating my mind this morning. On the show this morning, we'll be looking at some of these issues, the president's address and matters coming out of that address. Also, we'll be looking at developments coming from the Ghana Revenue Authority, GRA, regarding taxpayer identification numbers, TIN for short. Now, in a bid to widen the tax net to increase revenue mobilization for accelerated development, the GRA has commenced the implementation of a policy where taxpayer identification numbers, TIN for short, will be a prerequisite for transacting businesses with some specified state departments and agencies, including the Passport Office, the Driver Vehicle and Licensing Authority, DVLA, Lands Commission, some MDAs, Ministries Department agencies, and also the MMDAs, that's the Metropolitan, Municipal and District Assemblies. Now, we shall be looking at this development. Yes, it is a laudable one, but how do we make it feasible or more practical to achieve the objective it seeks to achieve? Then we'll turn our attention to matters coming out from Sierra Leone. Specifically, we're looking at the Commonwealth Election Observer Mission duties in Sierra Leone during their recent elections and matters coming out from that. Question is, how does the former president, our former president, John Dramani Mahama, who went into that country leading the Commonwealth Election Observer Mission, how does he get caught up in the furore around the conduct and the outcome of the elections in that country, which were held on the 7th of March with a runoff on the 31st of March? Now, the president, since the news broke about an alleged, attempt to rig the elections, has categorically denied these allegations. And the Commonwealth Election Observer Mission, we are told, is actually demanding an apology from the source of the accusation, which, according to media reports, is the All People's Congress, APC, the immediate former ruling party of Sierra Leone. Now, we'll be looking at this issue, what it means for election observer missions moving forward in subsequent elections around the continent and indeed perhaps around the world. Also, in the area of the Commonwealth, we'll be looking at the 2018 Commonwealth Games and matters arising. Now, the 2018 Commonwealth Games commenced on Wednesday, the 4th of April in Australia. And were we not shocked when we heard news coming out of the Ghanaian camp? Now, news about 50 persons who positioned themselves as journalists to cover this year's Commonwealth Games were found to be suspicious and flagged by Australian officials after they failed to provide credible evidence that they were indeed journalists as they claimed. What's interesting with this is that these persons were actually given accreditation to go as journalists. So a number of questions coming out. Now, 3news.com reports that the Sports Ministry and the Ghana Olympic Committee have both made strenuous efforts to absolve themselves from blame, but there are lingering questions. And today on the show, we'll be looking at these questions. Who is complicit? Who failed to do their job? Is there anything we can learn from this to deter these kinds of things happening? Because we do know that people have resorted to such tournaments or such games to actually escape, the country based on whatever reasons they have. So we'll be looking at that issue as well. At this point, we'll take a break. When we come back, I'll introduce the panelists for today's conversations and we will dig straight into the issues. Very promising show this morning ahead of us. So do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Newday Saturday edition live on 3FM 92.7. We're also live on TV3 here in Accra and streaming live online around the world at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. I'll quickly introduce our panelists for today's conversations. From my extreme left, we have Yao Opong. He is a lawyer. Next is Andrew Ejapa Mercer. He is the Honourable Member of Parliament for Secondary Constituency. He is also a lawyer. And next we have Kwame Jantua. He is a member of the CPP, also a lawyer, and the CEO of the Africa Energy Consortium. We are expecting a representative of the NDC to join us shortly. When he comes in, we will do the needful to introduce him accordingly. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to the show. We will be starting with the obvious, front burner issue, which is the Ghana-US Defense Cooperation Agreement. But we would want to take a listen to some snippets of what the president had to say in his national address delivered on Thursday. So let's just take a listen and come back to the panel.
Truth is sacrosanct. So let me state with the clearest affirmation that Ghana has not offered a military base and will not offer a military base to the United States of America. Indeed, the United States of America has not made any request for such consideration. And consistent with our established foreign policy, we will not consider any such request. However, in consideration of the realities of our circumstances and the challenges to peace in our region in our time, we have deemed it prudent to continue the cooperation agreement with the United States of America. It is our firm belief that the agreement will help enhance our defense capability and offer an important layer of support in our common effort to protect the peace in our region. Fellow Ghanaians, let me conclude by saying how outraged I am by the defamatory comments from my political opponents, some of whose patriotism can be so easily questioned, that the sovereignty of this country has been sold by my government and myself. I will never be the president that will compromise or sell the sovereignty of our country. I respect deeply the memory of the great patriots whose sacrifice and toil brought about our independence and freedom. I have stood with you, the Ghanaian people, all my adult life, fighting for our individual and collective rights. Everything I have done since assuming the great honor and privilege of serving you as President of the Republic demonstrates that I remain focused on building a self-reliant, free, prosperous Ghana, which will be able to make her own unique contribution to the growth and development of Africa and the world. Let us concentrate and spend our energies on working together to achieve that goal of a happy and prosperous Ghana, and reject the hypocrisy of the naysayers who led our country into bankruptcy and the worst economic record of modern Ghanaian history. Let us rise above them and build the Ghana of our destiny, the land of freedom, justice, progress, and prosperity. May God bless us all in our homeland Ghana and make her great and strong. I thank you.
So that was portions of the President's address saying, among other things, that the U.S. never requested a military base here, and so we couldn't have, as it were, given them that. And also, you know, talking about the fact that he would not put the country in any position, as it were, to jeopardize the country, in the sense that he knows how hard our forebears have fought for the country and wouldn't want to jeopardize that in that regard. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, the panel would have their say on this issue. Welcome back. So we'll dig straight into the issues. We're looking at the Ghana-U.S. Defense Cooperation Agreement, the never-ending story about that. The President came into the debate, formally if you like, on Thursday when he delivered his national address on the matter. Question is, did it quell the controversies surrounding this agreement or not? I will start off with, I'll go to Mr. Opong. Now this, like I said, it seems not to be, because I mean, the President spoke. Clearly, I don't expect anything different from him, so I'm just that. You understand? Yes. We don't want, I mean, unless you surprise me. So, it's there for you never know. 3 weeks now, we've had to discuss this on the show. It clearly tells you exactly how, you know, intense that issue is for Ghanaians. Then the President gave his address, and but sorry, before we go on, I think I need to introduce the NDC representative who just joined us. I think it's only fair that I do that. Mr. Sam George, he is MP for Ningo Pram constituency. He joined us. Good morning and welcome. Great, so we'll go to Mr. Opong here. Now the President comes in after this issue has been in the public domain back and forth. We had the sector minister talk about it initially, a number of media engagements here and there. Now the President has had to come in on Thursday. Question is, do you think the President's address was convincing enough to rest the matter? Has it brought closure to the issue, or does it bring closure to the issue?
Well, thank you very much. I think that maybe a related question is, what really is the issue that the President also sought to resolve or settle? I think, I listened to him fully from beginning to the end, and even the aspects that you favored us with this morning. And first of all, some people have taken issue with his posture, and minimally choice of language in terms of description of some persons in a certain kind of language. Well, for me, even if the President had not said that he was outraged, I mean, the demeanor, facial expression was enough, I mean, to inform anyone that a fair assessment of outrage could have been made from his posture and even the language, because this is not the usual language of the President.
But why would he be outraged?
Oh, but I mean, first of all, some outrageous allegations have been made against him as a person. I mean, to charge the president of someone who has sold or sought to sell the sovereignty of the nation. In Ghana, very unique, our sovereignty resides in the people, not even in parliament, as pertains elsewhere.
Right.
And so to accuse the president or allege that he, and maybe by extension his government, has by this agreement sold the sovereignty or sought to sell the sovereignty of the nation, I think it is an accusation that goes to him directly, personally also. Then also, as it were, let it seem as if he is the first person to have authorized this agreement. And that has never happened before. Then it also cast him in the eyes of what you lawyers call right-thinking members of the society. And that's why you use the word defamatory statement, that he doesn't care much about our security and has sold our security to another nation. I think they are very painful. And as people have the right to express themselves, I think that sometimes, in fact, I pity our leaders. It's as if they are only to receive the punches and they have no right to throw back.
But they say to get into politics or the public space, you need to have a tough skin.
Yeah, there again, I mean, some of these accusations were made by politicians who are also seeking power to use lawful means to unseat the president. Lawful means to unseat the president. So there is politics in it. Then also, he was much concerned about the reminder to him, or maybe reminder of him, that your father suffered the fate, in Twi we call it, in Tamkesie. Her father was given 4 years. He could only spend 2 years, a little more than that, because he was overthrown. And a reminder that a similar fate may befall him. I mean, these are not the sort of things that you take and you go out there conversing with your accusers casually. And of course, these matters concern national security and, more importantly, the army. One of the most important functions of our president is that he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ghana. Defense of the entire nation and its sovereignty, including marine bodies and so on. And he is also the person in charge of national security. So these are not matters that you come out to respond and you placate people as if everything is fine. So one, he had a personal duty to address what he himself calls these defamatory statements of him, that he must address these things. And so I think that in terms of posture and demeanor, in fact, it would have been deceitful if the language he chose were strong and yet his entire demeanor was totally different. That is not the mark of a good orator, because then in it, you will be deceiving the people. If your language is strong, it should be expressive. Your body language and everything should express it. I mean, I remember, may he so rest in, Professor Mills, when he went to the customs in Tema or so. Even he didn't use the word Dama trade, but he used language, and you could see that for the first, those of us who had known him on campus, for the first time, he was indeed outraged. He used the word revulsion. So, all the presidents have had occasion to express themselves in a way that they had clearly come out as somebody who is either upset or so furious about a matter of national importance. So for me, the language and everything else was quite appropriate for the occasion. So
what now, about, so, this question,
now,
yes.
I think we spoke about this thing the last time.
Yes.
I mean, some of us, when it comes to ideology, we will even be tempted to throw this whole agreement out. But when it comes to consistency with principles, there could be a few articles in this or areas that one may question why we didn't have a second look at. Because in this, there are a lot of, or quite a number of non-mutual beneficial provisions that I think we should look at it. But beyond this, it is no more the duty of Parliament. If you read carefully the Supreme Court decision in Indibugri and Attorney General, they stated clearly that after ratification, whatever is left is an executive function. And there are provisions in it for amendment, and that will also mean for variation. And I think that beyond the diplomatic expectation of us, that the two countries, in spite of this, will still perform the functions under this for our mutual benefit, and it happens because of mutual respect. And we believe that the U.S. and Ghana have been at this for many years, maybe since independence.
But quickly on that, given the posture of the president, I'm not even talking about the physical posture, but just the position that he maintains, which is basically justifying the agreement as it is, then the possibility of there being an amendment is not even likely to be the case, is it?
Well, I think, with all due respect, on the contrary, I think that he was careful not to even touch on the substance of this agreement, but the fallout, all right? Things that people have tried to link to this. For example, that we will invite the wrath of people who have for now not seen us as their enemies, but because we have become the friends of their enemies, they will then come and attack us. And he says that, I mean, we have been in this from independence to date. If these people, so-called potential enemies, have not seen that we have cooperated with the U.S., we have even facilitated effort by the U.S. to annihilate, for example, Boko Haram. If they don't know it, then I'm not sure that their touted intelligence facilities really exist, because they should have known.
Very well.
Especially the latest 2015 agreement and some other related agreements that are coming up. So that accusation that once you become the friend of the U.S., the possibility is that you'll be attacked. It doesn't exist.
Very well.
In Nigeria, those who are killing and maiming and abducting Nigerian girls are their own co-citizens, Boko Haram, and their cohorts from maybe other places. So, in short, my view is that, yes, when we come back and there is time, we'll point out to
we'll be going to
number of
certain
areas
issues,
where
yes.
I think that the president may have to apply his executive authority in addition to the recognized diplomatic beneficial relationship between the two nations, and will be able perhaps to even set up a joint committee to look at some of these areas that we'll be pointing out.
Very well.
And see if a variation would not be in order.
Very well. We will. Thank you for that, Mr. Opon. Let me move to Mr. Ejapamesa here. I want to pick on where Mr. Opon left off. The possibility. Obviously, the agreement provides for amendments, subject to both parties agreeing. And that would require, of course, looking at how it is currently, and from Mr. Opon's submission, it doesn't look like mutually beneficial for, the parties. That's according to Mr. Opon. But of course, that seems to be the general, yes, some portions, but that seems to be the general thinking of Ghanaians. Now, there's the talk about amendment. Given what we know of the government and clearly manifested in the president's address, again, the question I posed to Mr. Opon, are we likely to see scope for this amendment to satisfy the agitations of people? And I must add that they are genuine concerns.
Well, good morning to my co-panelists and to our cherished viewers, particularly my constituents in Second D. Yeah, I think that people have raised concerns, yes. Some legitimate, some based on lack of information. And I've looked at the document, and I think that there's room for some of the concerns, legitimate concerns that have been raised to be addressed, because you will notice, if I make appropriate provision, where it says that Article 17, that the parties hereby establish a joint committee to oversee the implementation of this agreement. The joint committee shall be co-chaired by representatives of the executive agent and shall convene as necessary. So I believe that this joint committee can take control of some of the issues that have come up and discuss it with a view to implementing it in a manner that satisfies some of the concerns that have been raised. And so that is why I have...
So you do agree that there are certain concerns that are legitimate, and which of these are you looking at? Examples?
Well, I have not averted my mind to the particular concerns that may require an amendment. And, well, possibly. My surprise, and I guess the president's outreach, and before I even go there, let me just indicate that I was pretty much assured, and I believe that the greater majority of the Ghanaian people were assured by His Excellency the President, because many of the calls that I received from people that I know in my constituency and several other places, including my own siblings, was that, why are you allowing a military base to be set up in Ghana? The President was emphatic that no such thing is going to ever happen in this country.
And we have to take his word for that.
Absolutely.
Because I've asked this question on the show before, and again, like I said, this issue has been running for the past 3 weeks. I said, there's a saying that if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it must be a duck. Now, if you look at and sorry, but let me just to add to your thing. I think under Article 2, which is looking at scope and purpose and scope, it goes on 2.2. It says this agreement clarifies access to and use of agreed facilities and areas by United States forces, thereby facilitating training, including to maintain unit readiness, combined exercises, and other military engagement opportunities. And 3 goes on to talk about the fact that United States forces may undertake the following types of activities in Ghana: training, transit, support, and related activities, refueling of aircraft, landing and recovery of aircraft, accommodation of personnel, communications, staging and deploying of forces and materiel. I think that's a word of art, meaning a term of art, sorry, meaning materials or equipment of the military and all of that. And people have said that, well, if you look at the definition or description of a military base, it pretty much talks about the fact that a military base is, a facility where military equipment, personnel are sheltered, all of that. So in view of that, would you say that really this is not the objective of this agreement? Yes, the president may have said what he said, but looking at it, aren't people justified to come to that conclusion?
It can never be, because now you and I know that we as lawyers, there's a clear statement of legal learning that documents ought to be construed as a whole. And so you cannot take specific provisions and not relate it to other provisions, because if you look at the 2 articles that you just read, Article 2 and 2.3, clearly 2.3 is pursuant to 2.2. You cannot construe it any other way.
But that is giving us the scope and purpose of the agreement.
Absolutely. 2 and 3 are clearly related. So to stretch it and say, go out of the scope to say that by agreeing to the use of these facilities creates a military base in Ghana is where the mischief lies. Particularly when in previous agreements we have operated these same arrangements. Americans come to Ghana under the 1998 agreement, the 2000 and 2015 one, and they bring equipment. They bring personnel. They bring all the things that we're saying that they can bring under this agreement. And they know it.
So you're saying there's no difference whatsoever between the 2015 and the 2018 one, because...
I haven't said so.
Yes.
I'm
so
saying that, you
that.
see, the only clear distinction between existing agreements, which this 2018 one has now superseded, is the specified location, the agreed facilities
and areas.
That is supposed to be an appendix to the agreement, which the minister, in his wisdom, and thank goodness he did not even attach it, because that location would have been exposed. We all know that this is a security arrangement. And so I was comforted that the president had given the assurance to the people of Ghana unequivocally that there is not going to be a military base. Indeed, the Americans have not requested for a military base, and that even if any such request was made, he would not grant it. On the issue of the sovereignty,
but let me just ask this, sorry, please, I hope you don't lose your train of thought, but let me just ask this. Given the kind of resistance, if you like, that people around the world have to America and the fact that they're trying to dominate the world with their military bases and all, do you think, I mean, within that context, do you think America would out and out request such a thing, military base, and then have it reduced into writing in an agreement that this is it? Isn't it the case that it's how you construe the agreement as it is written that would lead to one interpreting it to mean that it indeed the objective is to have a military base set up?
Abna, and I will refer you to the two provisions that you just read. I agree, it's construction. But in constructing the provisions of the agreement, you and I know that you cannot import extra material into it. It's the words. Express. That clearly indicates the scope within which we are operating. And if, look, people have, do you know the scope and size of what a military base is? Google. Well, the whole world, around the world, everywhere that America has a military base, we're talking hundreds of acres of land.
Well, this issue has set, I mean, majority of Ghanaians researching into this issue.
Absolutely.
So you've come across things like lily pads, which are not as huge as the military base, but they serve equal purpose.
You see, let's not do this to ourselves, okay? We have cooperation with the United States in several areas: economic, cultural, education, health.
For the longest of time.
Military. For the longest of time. And that's why the president said that, look, before you take away certain rights and privileges that you've extended to a friendly nation, you ought to satisfy yourself whether they are in breach of any of the provisions on the existing agreement. There's never been a breach.
Or that the conditions necessitating the grant has been has changed.
Never. And the conditions haven't changed. So he vested with executive authority the power to ensure our mutual security, deems this as a useful agreement to continue. And so we should look at it within that context, unless of course we want to be mischievous and play political, I wanted to use the word chaskele.
Football. That's what you use, don't you?
And it's unfortunate. And you see, I've heard people say that the president was condescending. He spoke down at Ghanaians. Clearly, he did not speak down at Ghanaians. He was not condescending. He did not disrespect the people of Ghana. He addressed the issues and pointed out that his expectation of people who have been in government, who ought to know the sensitivity of these agreements have put it out there and are manipulating frontline politicians who are manipulating, because the sense that people got initial military base, they knew very well that that was not the case. Yet what did they do? Look at the entire proceedings in Parliament, beginning from the committee where they dominated, where their concerns relating to the constitutionality of the document was amply captured in the report. They turned around and said, well, it's a majority report. Majority of whom? But of course, they know that Ghanaians, when you say majority, everybody thinks it's MPP. And so when you say that this report is a majority report, it will be considered as the MPP who have gone in there and approved or recommended to the plenary to approve. But if you look on the list of people who attended the meeting, the majority was the NDC. This is the official document of Parliament.
But
and so,
their argument on that, and this is just for purposes of us, to understand the whole process, perhaps how Parliament works even. They're saying that when they raised issues about that, and so there was a division created,
Abina,
upon the division being created, there's a certain procedure.
No, absolutely. Did the procedure ever happen?
That's the question.
And if the procedure did not happen, what does it tell you? That there was no division. Because if there was a division, the issue was going to be subjected to a vote. There was no vote. And there was no vote because there was no division. There was consensus. That is what happened. And the people who are going around issuing statements and throwing dust in the eyes of Ghanaians should be candid with themselves and be truthful. This is not a joke. It is not some kind of game. This is Ghana.
I think those raising issues are also concerned.
I don't have a problem, but you see, look at the trend right from the beginning. Because when this issue broke, why have you given away tax reliefs? It turned out that it already exists under the 1998 agreement, because at the time, none of us had seen the 1998 agreements. They played all sorts of games with it. Now, when the truth began to be laid bare, then they kept shifting the goalpost, which is fine. We can play the politics, and I'm a politician. I love the politics. It excites me. But when it comes to some issues that we don't have to play politics with, and I sit on the same committee with my very good friend Sam, we conduct some serious work there that is in the national interest, okay, devoid of politics. Indeed, we had an encounter on one of our trips. Sam, I guess I'm allowed to mention it. At one of our rounds, we were visiting one of these institutions, and there was a comment that was made, and I pointed to him that he's been playing politics with it. He was offended, and I apologized. And of course, that's the custom at committee.
We'll see it play out here very soon.
No, I don't have a problem. We can play it, and I know we'll play it.
You have a premonition, eh?
Oh yeah, I saw it clearly.
You see, there ought to be a limit to some of the things that we do and say.
Exactly.
Look,
quickly, then I move to the right side here.
And with respect, you see, I've heard people say over and over and over and over again that there are non-mutual provisions, and that offends the principle of reciprocity.
You think otherwise?
No, wait. You see, simple search, reciprocity. In international relations and treaties, the principle of reciprocity states that favors benefits or penalties that are granted by one state to the citizens or legal entities of another should be returned in kind. Now, have we requested as a country to have these same benefits that people are saying is lopsided from the Americans and been denied?
And I think that is
I think
that is the crux of the matter.
It should not be.
But that is the thing.
It can never be. Because respectfully,
it's just like this. Let me try to give an analogy. I hope it works. You're saying I'm going to give you something, whatever material thing it is, so you use it. But you're giving it to me knowing very well I can't use it. How beneficial is it then? We are in a relationship where, absolutely, look at the situation.
I love the analogy.
So then it may seem on the face of it that yes, we stand to benefit, but really we will not get that. Because we won't come to the point where we would even need to. Would you ever think that Ghana would want to
That's the point. We don't need it.
We don't.
Do we?
So then why do you get into it so that you lose ultimately?
You don't need it and the Americans need it, and they asking for you and granting it to them amounts to a lopsided
so
agreement.
So then it's not mutually beneficial.
But you see,
it's not mutually beneficial, is it?
You see, I live in Sekondi and Accra. You probably live in Accra and Kumasi. Now, if I give you access to my house in Sekondi anytime you come,
and you know I can't come to Takrady or wherever it is,
and you give me access to your house. You might as well have not given me that. You give me access to your house anytime I come to Kumasi. You're saying that because there's no possibility of you ever going to Sekondi, you won't give me access to your house in Kumasi?
No, the question is how mutually beneficial is it then?
You see, the mutual beneficialness of it would be based on need. Do we have a need as a nation for these benefits from America? If so, have we asked for those benefits from America? Mm-hmm. If we have asked, have they denied us? It is only at that point that you can say that, oh, but I gave you access to my land in Accra. Why is it that I'm asking for a land in Washington, D.C., you say you won't give it to me? That is in breach of the principle of reciprocity. But if that need hasn't arisen, it hasn't though.
Very well. Let me move to this side as well. Let me move to this side. Maybe Mr. Jantua will get it and then put it on record. Yeah, so Mr. Jantua, let me hear from you on this. You've heard the two previous speakers. Now, again, I will pose a question to you. Do you think the President's address brings matters to a closure, or should it resolve the matters?
Abna, let me say good morning to our viewers and good morning to my fellow panelists. But first of all, I want you to give us a process. So we're looking at the President's speech, and then we'll go into detail of the agreement itself.
We'll try to do that. I mean, if we have to, because we do have some other topics as well, but we'll try.
So let me start by saying, from the word go, there were about 3 follies that have created all this hullabaloo.
Right.
And let me start by saying, 1, the media. Joy FM's reportage that this agreement was
a secret document.
Was it not even a secret document? Was established under a military base was wrong. Because if they had done further checks, they would have realized the cooperation 1998, 2000, 2005, 2015, which would have set the platform for debate. So that was the first mistake. 2, MPP's communication lapse.
Is it the government's communication or the NPP communication?
Well, government.
Okay, yes.
They make up, it's made up of the MPP party. So their communication lapse. You know, before the President even came to speak, and I was one of the people who wanted to hear the President speak because I hadn't heard anybody speak. And I thought we needed more clarification to this. But I believe that if the MPP or the government had taken some actions before the president came in, it would have stayed this thing. And what are these actions? According to the agreement, there was an interministerial consultation.
Yeah.
That interministerial consultation had certain institutions being part and parcel of it. So the moment it broke on radio, when the military-based thing was being touted everywhere, the next point of call the following day was to have a press conference led by the Minister of Information, with the Foreign Minister and the Defense Minister present. With a Minister for National Security present, to now give us a resume of what went into the negotiations. At that meeting, everybody there could have asked all the questions they needed to ask.
So you think the sector minister, Honorable Nitiwo, addressing the media wasn't
enough? Because it says that, the agreement states that in clause 6, it was negotiated with institutions, the Ministry of Finance, the MOD, the MOFRI, and all those institutions were part and parcel of agreeing to this. So if that had come first, and the questions were thrown left, right, center, Ghanaians would have been able to ask whatever questions they needed to ask, the president would now have come to seal it. And when I say seal it,
or maybe not have even come to address the nation.
well, whatever the case is,
because people are asking about the necessity of the address.
Whatever the case is, I still think, because of the sensitivity of the agreement, the president still should have spoken. Now, the third one is his address itself. And for me, the address is in two parts. The first part has got to do with his own understanding of what this whole thing is about and why he thinks it's important. The second part, which I totally do not agree with, is the partisanship of how he talked about his opponents. Because really, it's not the opponents who started this argument. It is the entire people of Ghana who heard it and started asking questions. The entire people of Ghana and those who voted for him to be in power were asking questions. And so his address should not have been directed only, or even, in fact, I don't even see why he should even talked about the opposition. Because you see...
No, but he situated it within a context that knowing what you know, because under your respective administrations, similar arrangements had been done, and now turning around to make it seem like, oops, we don't know what happened. What are we talking about? That was within the context. You don't think it's justified?
I don't think he should have even gone there. It's because he went there, look at what we're talking about. You see, what makes this agreement slightly different from the other is the operative word enhanced. That operative word enhanced has changed the thinking of the others. And so for me, he shouldn't have even gone there. For me, what he should have done was to bring the whole country together. As father of the nation, as a statesman, he should have brought the whole country together, whether opposition or no opposition. Now, the fourth, with the sensitivities of this thing. And you see, when we, as political parties, when we now come into government, we feel, and as the Ashanti proverb goes, Nyanse wohui eni nipa baako tirim. Sense, wisdom is not in only one person's mind. When things like this come up, Ghana has an advantage of having how many ex-presidents alive? Rawlings,
Mahama 3.
Mahama 3 alive. We have the presence of the Council of State. I would have thought, with such a sensitive matter, and I don't know whether it happened, with such a sensitive matter, we would take advice from those three. Because President Akufo-Addo has entertained all those three before at Flagstaff House.
Jubilee House. No.
Well, that is what they want to call it. I call it Flagstaff House. That's what I know it to be.
Right, yeah.
Yes. So if they want to call it another name, that's theirs. I would call it Flagstaff House. He has entertained them in Flagstaff House for all of us to see. And with such a thing, and knowing Nana Addo, seeing the beginning of his tenure, he would always want you to prove him wrong. And sometimes when he does not agree with something, he will take audience and convince me.
But you see, sorry to cut you, on this issue, he talked in his address, he talked about the fact that our foreign policy is basically one that is revolves around bipartisanship. And so what one government starts, when the successor government comes in, they do not attempt to change it unless, you know, he gave certain conditions or circumstances that would warrant that. So given that background, would there have been the need to necessarily go back to, for instance, Ekufuor, who really is from the NPP fold, and John Mahama, who also from the NDC, but given this thinking about bipartisanship?
I use the word enhanced, which makes it slightly different from the others. Slightly different from the others. And the fact that, you see, I don't want to use the word, but the one thing President Akufo-Addo did that has exposed all this discussion is he wanted to be transparent.
Yeah.
Is he wanting to be transparent.
And complying with the Constitution.
Because the NDC, when they were in power and they were negotiating these things, never said a word to fellow Ghanaians. And even their own party members, because remember, Muntaka indicated that when the foreign minister, Hannah Tete, was drafting this thing, they didn't know nothing about it. But President Akufo-Addo feels that no, for the people who put me in power and me serving Ghanaians for such an important document, the people need to know.
And yet you say his reference to the opposition in his address was not justified.
Well, I'm saying that even the fact that he's made it transparent, he should have just ignored it. Just ignore. He's the president. Nobody is the president but him. He should ignore it. He shouldn't go down into party politics and campaigning mode again. He's the president. And he should know, look, when you have siblings and siblings are fighting and one of them does something to the other and it comes in the presence of the father can choose to ignore certain issues because of the relationship between siblings. And not try to make sure that he does one thing and the other sibling would feel that you are favoring one against the other. He's the father of the nation. Yes, he could have said what he said in a different way. For me, the key thing is that Ghanaians were expecting him to talk about the content of the agreement that they did not understand. Unfortunately, he didn't touch on that content. And so it has left still a gap where Ghanaians are yearning to see whether, we've discussed it here, whether we are going to be able to look at this agreement again before it's ratified or before we start the process of implementation. As I said, his political rhetoric there, for me, to some degree, I don't think he should have used certain words that he used. He used
quickly, and then I moved to
he used this thing about, and I quote, surely this is the kind of cynical manipulation by reckless self-seekers, which in fullness of time the people of Ghana will acknowledge and condemn. Now, you see, whatever you do, you should remember that you've been there before. Will I be right in saying that when President Akufo-Addo was then candidate Akufo-Addo, and he used the phrase "all die be die," was that reckless self-seeking? Can I term it as reckless self-seeking? Because a lot of people did not agree with him. And did he use that phrase because he felt using that would catapult him to be president? And so, when you now get into a certain position, there are certain things you should be very careful how you explain. Now, he also talked about secret documents.
That'll be the last, and then
Yes.
I go to church.
Yes. What does this say? The document itself on there, March 2018, secret. So, who started that secret document? The document itself
Says it's
started
secret.
the secret document.
Very well. Very well.
I end here.
That's fine. Now, Mrs. George, this issue, anytime it comes up, reference is made to previous or pre-existing agreements. And the fact that, and when the opposition comes into this argument or this debate, perhaps the main bone of contention or the main point where people tend to doubt the genuineness or the sincerity of the opposition in questioning this agreement has to do with the fact that, yes, there were previous agreements that, yes, there may have been some variations with the enhanced one now, but there was that basis or that foundation. And so perhaps you should deal with this in a certain way as opposed to how you are out and out there condemning it, making it seem as though nothing of that nature ever existed.
Well, let me say a very good morning to our viewers and my co-panelist and yourself.
Good morning.
And a very good morning to the good people of Ningo and Pampram. It's important that we put all of this in perspective and understand what is being said here. The President addressed the nation in a pre-recorded telecast some 2 days ago, on Thursday, some 2 days ago. If anybody seeks to say that the President's address was not condescending and insulting, then I do not understand what condescension and insults are. When the President chooses to descend to the levels where he descended and chooses to engage in name-calling and insult-mongering when he occupies the highest office of the land, that is inexcusable. We've seen presidents like Lawyer Opong said who've been livid with just cause, but that has never led them to descend effectively into the gutters.
Rolling Stone.
Exactly.
Well,
I mean, you took it out of my mouth. But hey.
If President Akufo-Addo
I'm sure we wouldn't have to search deeper
equate
to get a whole lot of
to
things.
President Rawlings, that's fine. But the bottom line here for me is this: the President did great disservice to the office. The President showed a disconnect from the realities on the ground and what the ordinary Ghanaian feels. The President clearly was not briefed on this matter properly because he put out a lot of factual inaccuracies, untruths, actually, lies. The President...
Maybe untruths would be better, just leave it at that. I mean, the lies, really.
An untruth is a lie. I mean, we can engage in the semantics, just like we would engage in
that's
what
why the
a
words
military
are
base
there. I mean,
is.
you choose... We're just talking about choice of words, and so I think we should be guided accordingly, seriously.
I just tried to find out from the internet what the military base definition is, and because that was in a banter between, or a discussion between yourself and my colleague Mesa. The Collins English Dictionary defines a military base as a noun and says it's a facility for the storage of military equipment and the training of soldiers. That's the Collins English Dictionary. I mean, Dangme is my mother tongue. I'm sure Fanti or something is Mesa's. This is the Collins English Dictionary. The military base is an English word, and that's what the definition of a military base is. So if you take the scope of this agreement, you take some of the clauses in this agreement. Take, for example, the purpose and scope in Article 2, and then you take Article 5, which talks about access to and use of agreed facilities and areas. And Article 7 particularly, which talks about the pre-positioning and storage of equipment, supplies and material. And you tell me that this is not a base. I mean, you can choose to play the ostrich, and that even goes as far as the president, telling us that this is not a base because the Americans have not told him that. I mean, that
they didn't ask for, so we didn't give them.
Well, I mean, the Americans have effectively asked you for a place to store equipment and material, a place where in the scope of the agreements they would train their officers. And you say they didn't ask you for a base. What is a base? Does the president know what a military base is? If the president had Googled what a military base is, he'll realize what the Americans were asking him for. You understand me? And so, clearly, when the president goes as far as referring to the majority of Ghanaians, because, look, you can choose to deny it, but the reality in this case is the fact that a large chunk of the Ghanaian populace, the popular vote on this matter, or the popular sentiment on this matter in this country, is an aversion to this agreement in its current state.
How did you come by that?
Oh,
popular
you just need to take a sampling of vox pops that have played across the media. I mean, like I've said, anyone can choose to play the ostrich on this matter. It's fine. I've been in government. There have been issues we've taken such a similar stance to and said that our position was the popular position. We paid the price for it at the last elections. You understand me? So, I mean, it's fair and square. They can choose to play the ostrich. But when a cross-section of Ghanaians, lawyers, doctors, engineers, soldiers, serving and retired, students, market women, politicians, come out and say that we don't like this agreement in its current shape and form. Because you see, that is the main thing. The government is trying to posit this and say that the MPP, the NDC, is opposed to an agreement. No, that's not what it is. The government is setting its own questions and answering it. They're not listening to us. When the government fails to listen, they can't address the issues of the people. Our issues are not with the fact that they want to sign a defense cooperation agreement. We've always had defense cooperation agreements. We cannot say we shouldn't have a defense cooperation agreement. But what we are saying is the form and shape of this agreement flies in the face of the sovereignty of Ghana.
But when majority of Ghanaians this is something
take
that was
that
approved
position
at the committee level, wasn't it?
I'm going to come to that point because, again, Mesa, my friend, my brother from Parliament, has put out factual inaccuracies, untruths about what happened in Parliament.
As it is now, the two sides have,
and you see, the point is we would put out the issues. We sat in Parliament.
Yes.
I was in Parliament on the day of the debate, okay? And this issue is an issue that, because I'm on the communications team for the minority, we actually had to sit with the ranking member on Defense and Interior, Agalga, to understand what went on in the committee when that accusation was made on social media, and I'll put out the facts. And to that effect, we asked him to put out an official statement, which has still not been rebutted by Seth Kwame Champon, who is the chairman on the MPP side of that committee, because those are the facts. But let me just say that when the president calls majority of Ghanaians and says that they're engaged in cynical manipulation by reckless self-seekers, again, spin doctors for the government have tried to make this say that the president was not referring to all Ghanaians, he was referring to politicians. No. The president referred to politicians on page 3 of the statement, but on page 4 of the statement, paragraph 2, he referred to the majority of Ghanaians, all Ghanaians who have taken a dissenting opinion. He called them, he said they were engaged in cynical manipulation by reckless self-seekers. That said,
you don't think the cynical manipulation was a reference to just the minority? Yeah, I have it here.
If you want us to read that paragraph, I can read it. Paragraph 2. It says, surely, this is the kind of cynical manipulation by reckless self-seekers, which in the fullness of time, the people of Ghana will acknowledge and condemn. Who are the people who have spoken out against this deal? Is it only politicians? It's not only politicians. Your colleagues in the media have spoken out about it, against this. Now, you see, let's go to this issue about that mischievous attempt by someone from Parliament on the majority side, who put out a picture of the votes and proceedings of the day with the list of members in attendance. Mesa knows, when we go to committee meetings, the clerk takes attendance. The attendance is not reflective of votes at the committee level. It is just a reflection of who attended. First and foremost, the NPP has more members on the joint committees.
But at that meeting, there were more members of
Now let me tell you what happened at that
wasn't
meeting.
It,
now let me tell you what happened at that meeting. At that meeting, the point was made clear by the minority members on that's the NDC members of Parliament at the committee meeting, that they wanted to invoke Standing Order 211 of our standing orders in Parliament. Now, the Standing Orders of Parliament 2111 says, every decision in a committee shall be taken by the clerk of the committee, asking each member of the committee separately how he desires to vote and recording the votes accordingly.
That's when there is a division.
Yes, because that
until then it's consensus,
and
isn't that it?
And I'm saying to you that at that meeting, the ranking member, Honorable James Agalga, who is alive, who you can call, he's in Accra today, put the position of the minority as being invoking Standing Order 211, asking for a division. But you see, when the ranking member asks for a division, the chairman of the committee cheers. And he has, I'm coming,
no,
please.
I just want us to understand the procedure of Parliament. And it will help us. Exactly. I just need to ask, you said he sought to invoke Standing Order 211.
Yes.
And call for a division. Is a division called or it happens? I just want to understand. Does it arise as a result of a lack of consensus, or you actually can call for it? Because there's a difference. I want us to understand that.
Now, a division arises when there are different opinions on both sides of membership of a committee. Now, what led to this call for a division and invocation of or invoking Standing Order 211 was when the minority, the ranking member, the minority on the committee, raised the issue that Article 75 of the Constitution had been breached. He was making reference to 75(1), that the agreement which came before Parliament had nobody signing it. And that was admitted by the defense minister. The defense minister himself was in that meeting. He admitted that, yes, that agreement had not been signed. On the basis of his admission that the agreement had not been executed, either by the president or any of his assigns, then the motion was moved that then that agreement should be withdrawn. It should leave the committee, go back to the executive, get it properly executed and brought back. Then the defense minister said that will not happen because he was time bound and they had to proceed, irrespective of the fact that Article 75 had not been adhered to. At that point in time, the minority in the committee, through his ranking member, made the point to the chairman that at this point in time, we cannot proceed with debating or discussing this issue because there's a division. You want to proceed, we believe that this is not a legal document to proceed. So we're invoking 211. Then the chairman steps in and stands down at the Standing Order 211 because it's the same thing that happened in Parliament. If you doubt what I'm saying happened in the committee, you remember that recently.
It's not that I doubt you. I just want clarification.
Just for our viewers. Just for our viewers. Honorable Muntaka raised a similar issue where he also asked for a vote, division, in the House. The Speaker ruled him overruled him, turned him down. So it is not as though when you invoke 211, automatically it happens. 211 was invoked, where we were going to have the clear division. The chairman of the committee stood it down. Now, if you want to take the fact, because this is an untruth that's been peddled repeatedly, and Ejapa Mensah has just repeated it here, that it was the majority members, the NDC members, who put this report. Let me tell you what happened. After they decided that 211 would not be adhered to, and the debates went on in the committee at the committee level, what they decided was, okay, we have differing opinions, okay, because you have two options. You either walk out, as the minority did in the plenary, or you sit through and ensure that because the standing orders also take into consideration the fact that instead of us having a minority report, which we tried to do with the cash receipts scandal, then the committee's report must incorporate the dissenting opinions. Those dissenting opinions, if you remember the report that was brought to the plenary, 6.4. 6.4 stated categorically something which the majority did not like. And so on the floor of the plenary, the chairman of the committee amended it. He moved an amendment to it. And I can read what 6.4 said.
We will need to take a break. So
let me just quickly read 6.4. 6.4 was on freedom of movement of vehicles, vessels, and aircraft.
And that's the committee report.
That's the committee's report. It said, the committee noted with concern the unfettered access the agreement grants to the aircraft, vehicles, and vessels of the DoD, Department of Defense, US, to enter, exit, and freely move within the territory, airspace, and territorial waters of Ghana. This may appear to undermine the sovereignty and security of Ghana. Committee report. On the floor of the House, and if Mesa will remember, Kwame Echampong, my very good friend and chairman of the committee, asked that there should be an amendment where the committee should be replaced with some members. Yes. Because they were trying to take themselves out. That tells you
because at that point consensus had broken down, hadn't it? Because you had raised serious issues.
So you're just buttressing the fact that I made that what Mesa and other NPP spokespersons have put out, that this report this approval from the committee level was done by the NDC members is factually
No,
incorrect.
what I'm saying
because
is,
you're just admitting
no,
that consensus had broken down. You just said that on air.
No, please, just a minute.
You just said consensus had broken down.
I know what I said. You don't need to
You didn't
reiterate.
say
I'm
that?
coming. You just said the said Kwame Champo, I believe that's
Yes.
his name, sought to revise that thing to reflect what happened. And I'm saying, yeah, but you seem to have had a problem with that. And I'm saying that would have reflected what you're saying, which is that at that level consensus had broken down.
Maybe you're mixing what I'm saying up. All I'm saying is he has posited on this platform that that report and the approval and everything was done by a majority of NDC members. I'm showing you proof and evidence that that was not the case. The NDC was strictly opposed to the shape and form in which this agreement came before to the plenary. Now, when people say...
We need to take a break, please. We'll take a break. When we come
We'll
back,
come
we'll
back
conclude, yes, on your submissions. You're watching New Day Saturday edition. We'll take a break. We'll be right back to continue with the discussion on the Defence Cooperation Agreement. Welcome back. This is New Day Saturday edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7 and online around the world at 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. I'll be returning to the panel to wrap up on the conversation on the U.S. Ghana-U.S. Defense Cooperation Agreement. Indeed, there are so many issues I'd have loved us to look at, but of course we don't have much time because there are other issues on the agenda for today. So we'll do a quick, wrap up on this and then move on to the other topics. So, Mr. Sam George, if you could kindly...
I'll just wrap up.
Yes, please.
Uncle, my senior Kwame Jantwa made the point that the president tried to be transparent, and that's why he brought this deal. Well, unfortunately, the president didn't try to be transparent. The president had no options, Uncle Kwame, because previous presidents did not try to hide anything under the cloak of secrecy. They only used Article 75(1) as they understood it at the time. You understand me?
Really?
It was a Gitmo 2 ruling until the Gitmo 2 ruling in 2017 that asked that all such agreements, and I still hold the view, respectfully, of the Supreme Court that he erred in that ruling. Because you see, what this is clear example of the problems when you say that all such international agreements, irrespective of the security implications, must be brought into the public space and sphere. So when President Akufo-Addo brought this agreement before Parliament, it's not because he seeks to be transparent where President Rawlings, President Kufuor, President Mills, and President Mahama were not transparent. It is because right now, any president after President Akufo-Addo, so long as the Supreme Court ruling on the Gitmo 2 stands, is compelled to bring that agreement to Parliament for
quickly,
ratification.
then we move on. Are you saying that until the Constitution is not mandatory to comply with the provisions until
yes.
the Supreme Court makes
that, yes.
I'm sorry, you're wrong on that.
I'm not.
But
no,
clearly you're wrong. But just wrap up for me, and then I
will
come
wrap up.
to.
Well, I don't even understand what your locus is to determine interpretation of the law. The interpretation of the law is
that's fine. I know.
I have made reference to the Supreme Court. There's only one body that is responsible for interpretation of the law, and that's the Supreme Court. That is the case that went before the Supreme Court was for interpretation of 75(1). The Supreme Court has interpreted it that other presidents had given a wrong interpretation to it, and they have now given their own interpretation that the may in 75(1) is overridden by the shall in 75(2).
Thank you very much.
You understand me?
I think we need to move on quickly because we have.
This is just the first one. The second one, which is just fundamental, is that let's break it down for President Akufo-Addo and the government. That the problems we have with this agreement is not the fact that you're having a defense cooperation agreement. It's the fact that you are allowing the entry and importation of all manner of weapons without any checks, all manner of weapons into Ghana, biological, nuclear, or anything, without payment of commensurate taxes. That's different from all the previous agreements. Again, the free use of Ghana's radio spectrum. That again is another difference.
I think we need to move on. That's
and then
enough.
the
Thank you very much.
of the laws of Ghana and the Supreme Court, where you cannot make claims.
Please respect my authority here on the show as a moderator. When I say it's okay, it's okay.
Yeah,
let's move on.
Dictator.
Seriously, that's fine. I'm not a dictator. Please, let's just get it out there quickly.
Let me take it from
quickly, and then we'll move on, please, Mr.
First of all,
I'll give
the May in 75 only relates to execution, and that is where of course, the minority side erred first of all, the Supreme Court has said it, Parliament reminds us almost every day that they are the masters of their own rules. And so when Parliament accepts a document that is not signed, it is within the powers of Parliament to do so. In any case, that is where the word may execute or cause to be executed. The second part, which is the B, which you are comparing, which are incomparable, relates to the ratification, shall be ratified. It has nothing to do with the nature of the document. Secondly,
he didn't get my point.
Please, it's fine. Secondly, disclosure to Parliament doesn't mean disclosure to the whole world. The Gitmo 2 document agreement was disclosed to the Supreme Court, but even the lawyers were warned never to disclose it. You have committee of the whole. You have other systems that could have still discussed these matters without bringing it out to the public. The fact that it should be disclosed to Parliament and Parliament to ratify doesn't give members of Parliament the right to disclose these things outside the framework of Parliament.
That members of Parliament disclose this.
No. You are saying that our good friend Mr. Jantwa was benevolent to the president for saying that the president wanted transparency. He had no
His
option.
hands are tied.
Please. I'm saying that the fact that he disclosed it to Parliament didn't give members of Parliament the right to bring this document out. But that is where I also have...
I'm asking, did we bring it out?
Are you now cross-examining me?
I'm a member of Parliament, and you're suggesting that we brought it out.
Just please, let him wrap up, then we move on quickly.
That is unfair.
You are saying that once he has brought it to Parliament, you should not be blamed for his disclosure. And I'm saying that the fact that he has been brought to Parliament didn't give Parliament the right to disclose sensitive information contained in a document that has been brought to Parliament. The fact that you should act in compliance with Article 75(2) doesn't give Parliament itself the right to disclose it.
But that's what he's asking, whether you're saying then that it's Parliament that
but then also,
the document.
that is where I think the President should also look into which of his own cabinet ministers disclosed this to the media.
Well, that's what
that is a very important, because he raised it that it is not a secret document, and yet it was one of your own cabinet ministers. I'm very sure that if he took the chance,
but you don't know this for a fact.
No, please.
It's speculation at this point. Mr. Pong, let's be guided,
please. My point is that then they should take that media house.
Let's be guided.
That cabinet, a secret document, executed or agreed to by cabinet, and this thing came out before it went to Parliament.
No,
but I'm saying that.
But that's what's out there. But let's not speak. Just a minute, please. Please, 30 seconds to wrap up for me, quickly.
Be that as it may, it emanated from the government. The government is the sole source of this document.
That is
that's true. We don't really know. Mr. Pong, I think your point is clear. That is worthy of us to investigate this matter, which is fine. But we can't make speculations here. Mr. Mesa, you come in. Let him land, please.
It is also not true that before the Gitmo 2, no such agreement had gone to Parliament. The earlier one, which I think Nana Akufo-Addo himself was the Attorney General, it went to Parliament, or the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
It
went to Parliament.
The non-surrender.
The non-surrender agreement. It went to Parliament. It was an agreement which is akin.
That's fine.
In any case,
that is fine. I think we can.
No, can I conclude?
Yes, please. 30 seconds to conclude.
The fact that the Supreme Court has not pronounced in the constitutional provision doesn't give you the right to violate a constitutional provision. The provision was clear enough. You just decided, or some of the members of this previous government decided not to just comply with it.
Very well. Point well made. No, Mr. Pong, I think
in Parliament, the minorities' sole fundamental reason why they walk out was not because they had problems with the agreement in terms of content, but because they say it had not been executed.
Very well, that's fine. Honorable Mesa, quickly from here, then we move on, please.
And then you go out to say something else.
Mr. Pong, thank you very much.
The issues that have been raised that require my response.
It's getting heated here.
You see, we can say whatever we want to say, but the issues are really simple. To say that the document leaked from the government is completely incorrect.
Why?
Well, you could say it's speculative, but not incorrect necessarily. You could say it's speculative, but not.
I said to you during the break that it is not every information that you know that you want to discuss on a platform like this. Yeah. But we know where the document.
That's fine. Since you're not going to disclose, then let's move on.
And it was
if
from
you're not
Parliament.
going to disclose, then let's move on.
Okay.
Yes, please
it
wrap
was
up
from
for me. Wrap up for me. But exactly, look at the timelines. The timelines.
When before documents. You see.
Oh God. Okay.
I can tell you. Why don't you take the media?
Gentlemen,
I can tell you.
Yes.
That the document was actually given to the table office, and the next moment he was in the media.
So okay. So it's worth investigating, I think, because you can't have.
But you see.
Mr. Messer, you have just a minute to wrap up for me, I beg, and then we move on.
Because
I'll come to you.
I'm a member of Parliament, and I'm seized with the information relative to what transpired at the committee. It may be important for me to conclude on that bit, because I mean the present statement addressed to the nation is clear. People may have issue with the style. I think that, like Yao said at the beginning of the show, he had to be forceful in the delivery to put some of these issues in proper perspective.
Very well.
But you see, the NDC is trying to create a certain impression that they raised issues with this agreement, and that the majority, that is the MPP, sought to disregard the issues that they raised and proceeded to approve this document. So it is our document, and we are not shy. Okay. See,
I think, Honorable, I think we need to move on.
It's important.
We need to move on. I get it, but we need to move on, please.
Division
we need to move on.
Very well.
Sincerely. And Mr. Jantua, quickly, and then we go.
I'll try and be as quick as possible.
Yes. I mean, I've been asked to move on for the fastest, the longest time. And
we're looking at what is intelligence and what encompasses a bilateral agreement. Where intelligence is concerned, there are certain things you cannot expose. With something like this, there are things that you can bring out and discuss. I don't see a problem there. But let me say that President Akufo-Addo's
address?
His address, when he compares it to peacekeeping, I don't think he should have even gone there. Shouldn't have gone there. Lastly, his address has exposed something that question has been asked over and over and over again since this government came into power. And let me just quote, and maybe he has answered that question for us. And I quote, his last bit, he says, "Let us concentrate and spend our energies on working together to achieve that goal of a happy and prosperous Ghana, and reject the hypocrisy of the naysayers who led our country into bankruptcy and the worst economic record of modern Ghanaian history." So, his annoyance must have stemmed from this. He is there and he knows at the present moment the country is bankrupt because of the previous party's actions and performance. So, we have been told
that the country is bankrupt.
Yes, but he said it. Hasn't he said it, yeah?
Very well.
Well, whatever the case is, he came to meet a bankrupt economy.
But of course, that has been said.
Well,
that's fine.
No, the party in power has always tried not to go that way. But the president, inventing his spleen, has indicated to us that he's been struggling because the country is bankrupt.
Very well. Well, I'm just being told that we have I think a lawyer on the line. This person, lawyer Naneje Ibafor, he was, I believe, the plaintiff's lawyer in the Gitmo case, and he would want to make a clarification regarding some statements that Honorable Sam George made in respect of the Gitmo 2 case. So if Nana is on the line, let's hear you. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. And you?
It's just a little contribution.
Yes.
I'm very well, thank you. Just a little contribution in respect of the philosophical underpinnings as to why such agreements should go to Parliament. First and foremost, and I'm going to do that contribution in the form of rhetorical questions.
Okay.
First and foremost, if such agreements do not go to Parliament, how would it bind successive governments, especially where the successive government would have to continue with obligations under that agreement? That is the first question. Secondly, where, for instance, is going to have an impact on the budget of this country, that is the consolidated fund. And we all know that you cannot charge the consolidated fund unless it's sanctioned or approved by Parliament under Article 107 of the Constitution. How it will be unlawful in that regard? You know, thirdly, how would we have records of it where necessary? If you recall, one of the things that has come up following the transition, the recent transition from the NDC to the MPP, is lack of such records. You know, it's lack of such records. And so therefore, for anybody to suggest that there should be some discrimination in terms of what agreements go to Parliament and what does not go to Parliament, I believe it's not speaking in the spirit of what I call the philosophical underpinnings of such provision. Okay. Now, indeed, for me, if you compare what goes on in Ghana to what goes on in America, you discover that the Americans over a period of time have made an exception to the rule, which is that where, for instance, the agreement is not going to bind successive governments, where the agreement is not going to infringe on the fundamental human rights of people, or where the agreement is not going to impact on the country's budget, then the president can solely enter into such agreement without recourse to the Senate.
And would that be by way of, for instance, an executive instrument?
Exactly. That is by way of what they call the sole executive agreement.
Okay.
But in the circumstance of this case, you are looking at an agreement that does not even have a tenure. It doesn't have a tenure.
Right.
Yes. All it does, or all it has, is the right to terminate at a certain point. And so it's an agreement that is clearly going to bind successive governments. And so in the circumstance, it's of the kind that requires parliamentary approval. And I think that the president should be commended. Now, if you recall, and what the debate that has transpired so far, you discover that the 1998 and the 2015 did not go to Parliament. What must have informed that? I think that we need to stick to best democratic practice in this country. We are falling short in that regard, and it should not be encouraged. Democracy requires transparency. Democracy requires that the people whose money are going to be used or whose pays are going to be used are involved in such decision making, which is why Parliament's involvement needs to be sought. Very well. But in our case, we seem to be making the argument that we should be disregarding that. I don't think it is proper. And I disagree with Sam George.
Very well.
There is a clear constitutional underpinning, philosophical underpinning, which is situated in the principles of democracy and should be encouraged. And I think that the Nanabe should be commended for taking the agreement to Parliament. Yes.
Very well. We want to say thank you for that intervention, and we do appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's Naneje Bafwewa, and he came in with those submissions. Yes. We would need to conclude there. I believe, Mr. Jantwa, you were on the floor quickly, and then we go. But I'll take some messages as well. I think we can wrap up on this with that. I think we can wrap up on this. I mean, I've been signaled a million times already by my production to move on. Well, please, you do understand. I mean, you came back with to open that. Let me take some messages. Let me take some messages, please. This says, "Good morning, Apana and your panelists. It will be better to allow the president to continue with his unfulfilled promises and giving him opportunities to divide us further. I was disappointed and sad because it appears he was too partisan and fell short of rather unifying the country." That's James in Zebula. Michael Ameni says, "Hello, Abna. Good morning. President Akufo-Addo's speech was extraordinary, and he has exposed the propaganda, the mischief, and the hypocrisy by the NDC and their surrogates in this controversial Ghana and U.S. military cooperation agreement." It's quite lengthy, so I think I will end it there and move on to others. The president's speech was hollow, very empty and bereft of substance and replete with insults. This president, he says, is intolerant and does not appreciate the issue at hand. This is Paul. You can say where you're coming in from. Good morning to Abna and to you, Abna, and your panel. Sometimes it's better to keep quiet and be thought to be a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Our president, upon breaking his long silence of, he says, incommunicado on the Ghana-US deal on Thursday, 5th April, has justified this wise saying. If the president claims he believes in the rule of law and democracy, and if he so respects the grievances and the plight of the ordinary Ghanaian, why can't he back off from this, you call it suicidal deal, that will in a long way jeopardize the peace, security and sovereignty of the Republic of Ghana? That's Abdul Ganiyu in Sahana Tamale. I hope I got that correct. So good morning, Abna. While people are putting their country first, our president is putting his emotions first. That's Osman in Tamale. Good morning. President Akufo-Addo says the US-Ghana deal is not about setting up a military base. Some of us are appealing to the president to go back to the Americans and rather negotiate for a base because we want American soldiers to fly. Really? Okay. Thanks for that, though. Good morning, Abna and your panelists. The president claims Ghana has not and will not provide a military base for the U.S. Meanwhile, everything contained in the agreement can be seen as not only a military base, but a detailed definition of it. So what is Mr. President talking about? Nana should come again. I'll pull the brakes on here and then we'll start with, we'll move on to the tin issue, which is, I mean, it's been lauded by many. The GRA is implementing a policy that requires people or persons who want to transact business with certain specified state institutions to have a taxpayer identification number known as a TIN for short. It's been lauded, like I said, but questions are being asked about how this can be, implemented in a way that would ensure that the objective of this whole exercise is met. But Mr. Janto, let me start with you on this one. Your thoughts about this?
I do not understand whether it is a backdoor for the national identification card. Because definitely it's not everybody who would be dealing with these institutions that we talk about. It's not everybody who is likely to get a TIN number, although it is good. It is good for people to be identified and make sure that their taxes are being paid. But still, it doesn't cover everybody. I think for me, the most important thing is to bring out this national identification card. You go anywhere in the world, and countries like the UK, they have the National Health Insurance number. Without that number, you can't do anything. And that number identifies your address, identifies everything about you. Where does this new digital address code thing fit into this TIN number thing we're trying to do? I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying that more should be done with regards to the identification of Ghanaians and those who live in this country. And for me, the first point of call is the ID card. What has happened to it? We heard when the MPP got into power that it is something that they are going to push and push strongly. It seems as if it's gone to sleep.
It was launched.
Yes, what have we heard? Shouldn't that be first? That should come before anything. The other thing was that...
But this is serving a certain purpose, which is it's identifying taxpayers and potential taxpayers, so that at any given point in time, this number would be a basis for, certain, if you like, deductions or whatever it is in terms of tax.
Does it cover everybody? Even with this current exercise we are doing, the informal sector, does it even cover all of them? We want a situation where the identification covers everybody. So for instance, if we had the ID card in place, everybody should know their ID card number by heart. So that you go anywhere, the first thing they ask you, your ID. And even if you don't know, you don't have it on you, you know the number. They punch that number in, everything about you comes up. That way you can even be able to identify those who haven't paid tax, those who have to pay tax, and all these things. For me, yes, it's a good thing, but I don't think that is the right umbrella to go under in terms of bringing everybody together. Because it's not everybody who has a job.
Exactly. So you're saying that if you don't have need for a driver's license, for instance, you wouldn't be confronted with this. If you are not going to register a company, you wouldn't be confronted with it. So I see what you mean.
So still, it's just a certain group of people who will be paying the tax. And I do agree with the fact that we want to get off aid. And the only way we can get off aid is to try and enhance domestic finance. But in so doing, it has to cover everybody. In so doing, we have to have some pilot scheme that would tell us some of the challenges and problems we want. Yes, and I do agree that the government has a 4-year window to be able to put all these together. But we should remember, such things have got to do with new governments coming in and pushing it forward, because it is something that would help the economy.
Very well. Let me move to Mrs. George. On this issue, this is supposed to be part of the e-government project.
Yes, it
that
is.
Was
and I have
since for a long time.
Yeah.
It's been in the works. But
e-government started under President Kufuor, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the longest.
Started as e-Ghana and then transitioned to e-government under President Mills.
Yes.
But before I go there, just my wrap up, 1 minute on this.
Well, I mean, at this point, I will let you go, because
the fact, one fact that was put out in the president's speech had to do with the fact that when our troops go on peacekeeping, they do not carry their national passports. That, again, is not entirely correct. When our troops travel...
Use the word
some.
Well, let me just read.
Please.
It says it is important also to state the conditions of the agreement mirror closely the conditions under which Ghana participates in peacekeeping operations under the United Nations. When our troops go on most peacekeeping duties, they do not carry their national passports. They carry their military identities. That's incorrect. Our troops carry their passports, and then they're issued UN service IDs, not even their Ghanaian military IDs. So the briefing for our president needs to be better. Now, coming to the teen issue. When it comes to the teen issue, I mean, it is a fantastic initiative. It's something that I believe is a step in the right direction. However, I ask myself, and I associate myself to a large extent with the positions made by the Commonwealth, because you see, when you look at this, I see this as just another layer of bureaucracy that we're adding to an already heavily bureaucratic public sector. It means today, if I want to get a passport, I now need to go through the bureaucracy of a teen before I get a passport. I'm a SNIT contributor. Does SNIT not already have my details? Am I not already paying taxes? Why should I now go and apply at the Registrar General's Department again for a teen? Why should we not have a system? Yes, a GRA. Why shouldn't we have a synchronized system where everybody who already has a business, a teen number is generated for you? In fact, we should have a system online where if I go online, I can actually just access it on my laptop or my phone, and it will generate my TIN for me. If I go to the passport office and there's a problem with my TIN number there, what can happen is they will resolve it right there and then for me. But the processes of going through this whole TIN registration is really cumbersome. Again, you know, one key thing that is interesting is the fact that for you to get your TIN, you need a national identification number. So let's assume.
But we don't have that, so yes, but yes.
So
it's
the
not
point is,
the only.
yeah, but let's assume that to get the TIN, I don't have a passport. I've never traveled, so I don't have a passport. I don't have any of the national ID cards. I don't have a national health insurance card. I don't have call it a SNIT number or anything.
A voter's card.
A voter's card. Then it means I can't get a TIN. You understand me? So are we rushing the implementation of this TIN when we've not put in place all of the systems?
Is that why it wasn't implemented under your administration?
I will not
because
say that is the only reason.
I'm just asking, just to put it in context, that this is not coming as a new thing. It has been in the works forever.
And I think that
there was an announcement that it was going to start with effect from January 1st, 2017. And that was in 2016, yeah. You understand?
But you see, I think that going forward as a nation, we need to be careful. We passed the National Health Insurance spending or appropriation in Parliament before we rose. And in those debates, one of the things that we raised as members of Parliament was the fact that you keep seeing repeated expenditure on IT infrastructure. Huge expenditure, close to 9% of the NHIA's entire budget for this year is going into IT infrastructure. And it's not peculiar to this year. Under the NDC, it was the same. under the NPP it is continuing. So what IT infrastructure is this? Why can't we harmonize? We have the National Information Technology Agency, which is the government's IT agency.
Who are never used when it comes to procurement for news.
Why don't we use NITA to harmonize all of these databases? You understand me? All of these databases should be harmonized. Let's have one database and one number. So when I enter that number, it can serve as my SNIT, it can serve as my TIN, it can serve as my driver's license.
Everything.
Because, you know, even up till today, I was robbed some few years ago, and there were fingerprints, visible fingerprints. The police came, did all the data analysis, and I asked them, oh, so how are we going to run it through a database? And they said, oh, there's no database. So we ask ourselves, even our police, if you want to register a firearm today, your biometrics are taken manually. There's no digital backup of it. There's no digital. So everything we're doing, so many biometrics, but there is no system that is communicating. So you have a TIN
interface
that doesn't interface and may not actually solve, like Uncle Kwame said, may not solve the real problem that the TIN is supposed to solve, expanding the tax net. Because you will end up having just a certain middle class still being the target for this TIN. And those are the base, who are more. Who, if they contribute a little amount, would expand the revenues. But let me
just be net. Well. I don't know, not to say, try to. Maybe it's guessing or something. But mischievous. No, I'm not mischievous. That the thing is, most people at the base, as you are.
The thing is, I don't know whether you're referring to the thing or the tin.
The thing. I'm saying thing, THIN.
Okay.
They're two distinct things. So, usually, I think the perception out there, and perhaps it's true, that people at the base tend to have voter IDs. They usually are the most people who patronize
elections.
Exactly. So, isn't it the case that, well, they may have, I mean, you raise a valid point, I must say. But at the end of the day, maybe we are thinking that they don't have IDs, but they would have. Because voter IDs is one of the accepted means of, you know,
absolutely
going ahead with the TIN registration. And
yeah, they may have it, but the question you ask yourself is then what is the incentive for such a person to go through the bureaucracy of registering for a TIN?
That is, if you don't do that, you're not able to do what you want to do.
But Abina, take my auntie. She has a voter's ID card, so you compel her to go and register for a TIN. She's going to ask you, what do I need it for? I say, oh, if you want to get a passport or you want to get a driver's license, you need a TIN. She'll tell me, I'm never going to travel and I'll never own a car.
Very well. I'm told we need to take a break, so we'll take a break. When we come, I will move on to the left side of the table for their comments as well. You're watching and listening to Newday Saturday Edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Newday Saturday Edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7 and online around the world at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. Just before the break, we were looking at the GRA's implementation of the taxpayer's identification number as a prerequisite for transaction of business with some specified state institutions like the Passport Office, DVLA, and other agencies of state. Now I will be turning over to the left side here to have the perspectives of Mr. Opon next, and then I'll move to Honorable Ejapa Mesa.
Well, frankly, I mean, payment of tax, as you know, is a constitutional obligation. And Article 41 J say that, of course, the exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations, and accordingly, it shall be the duty of every citizen, J, to declare his income honestly to the appropriate and lawful agencies and to satisfy all tax obligations. So this is an obligation that is imposed on us, and therefore, any facility or mechanism that will ensure that people who are subject to tax pay their tax honestly is a welcome idea. I have a difficulty rather with, for example, the thing being a condition precedent for the acquisition of a passport. Yes. I think that may have a legal problem, because as a citizen of Ghana, I am entitled, once I'm able to prove that I'm a citizen of Ghana, I'm not sure that an act of parliament or a policy by a state agency will be effective impediment to my acquisition or right to acquire a passport.
Right.
Again, what about people who are not subject to tax? Children. If I want a passport for my child, of course the GRA,
I think exemption for that,
must be 18 years.
Absolutely.
Or so. No, I'm saying that these have to be clarified. 2, filing of processes in court. We want to encourage people to access justice. This is not a reason for people not going to court. But if you say that without the tin, the person cannot, the process he wants to file, whether by himself or his lawyer, should not be filed at the court. It's problematic. Again, why
would it have to be applied in terms of the firms, lawyers?
Well,
and
they
firms.
said filing, but I've seen a recent case from the High Court where the judge dismissed that application that the suit should be dismissed because the person has not indicated her TIN number.
Oh, no.
The judge refused it and said that she has jurisdiction to hear the matter. So, and again, I don't understand why, if somebody wants to pay tax, he must prove identity. I think it should be, there should be no impediment. Anybody who is subject to tax, come and get your tin, whether a Ghanaian or not. Why will I go to the GRA and say I'm a Japamesa when I know I'm Yaopong?
It's possible.
No, but why? For what?
I don't know.
I'm saying
for
that.
mischievous purposes only.
But I'm saying that.
Somebody can do
I'm
it.
saying that the disadvantages attendant to people not even going there because of this impediment will be greater than that you have asked everybody, move to the next available GRA office or go online, pick the forms. This is your TIN number. Because all this will be subject to the national identification number that we are talking about. Of course, recently, vehicles have been given them to facilitate the issuance of it. And I believe that very soon, Professor Tifa and his friends are going to issue them for us. So it is important that that comes up, because that will be given to even a child who is born today. Yes. And you carry it with him for the rest of his life. He wouldn't even need a tin, because the moment that is assessed, all information about you, your obligations to the state, they will all be indicated, even the vehicle you use. So, and also registering documents at the Lands Commission. We want people to be encouraged to register their documents. But we know that, as Sam just said, if somebody won't travel, he wouldn't go for a passport. People naturally don't even want to go and file, register their land, so they pay taxes. So he will say that, well, I've built my house, so let me stay away. So they should look at this and maybe rather educate us or myself. The necessity for this identification to become a condition precedent for the allocation of a TIN number to me. I don't see the necessity in actual
no, the
fact.
TIN
that should prevail over.
Is the prerequisite for obtaining or accessing.
No, but conversely, you still need any of these also before you get a TIN.
Well, yes. You need some form of identification.
Yeah, so I'm saying that just give it out to everybody who come to say that I'm Yaopong. Give it to me.
To further expand the base,
yes,
really.
It
that's
is
what
just for the payment of taxes. Yeah. It is not evidence of the fact that you were a citizen of Ghana or that you are. It's just to enable you to trace the person. Of course, if the person comes to impersonate, it is a criminal offense. When you find out, and let it come out that anybody who impersonates another is a criminal offense.
Very well.
So I think they should look at it again, because they have said recently that the numbers that they have gotten now, about 200 and something thousand, doesn't meet their expectation. Of course it wouldn't, because
apparently in December 2017, they recorded the 1 millionth tin that was issued.
But then the information that unless they said 2 million, but they still said that it doesn't meet their expectation. Okay. They should have gotten more by now. So just make it as free as possible for people to pay tax. It is one of the functions of the revenue, to make it as easy as possible, for people to feel compelled to pay their taxes. And don't put this impediment, and especially the passport one. I still think that somebody can
raise an issue.
It's a fantastic.
Quickly, then I go to Mesa.
We can do it the other way. Anybody who goes to hospital, through the hospital card, your GRA person there, what number? Then you register.
Yes. Then you
Car,
just
DVLA, anybody,
Yes.
so that it opens it up.
So there are several options or various ways we could do that. Yes, quickly.
Now the bureaucracy of registration.
Honorable Ejapamesa, on that, and also touch on, I think Honorable Sam George mentioned the fact that it's the interface among various department agencies is an issue that we need to look at, because I think in the news we heard that some people had gone to certain places and it wasn't being implemented as it should be, as in demanding the tin before the services would be rendered and all of that, obviously because of these interface challenges. So how do we resolve that to move forward?
Well, I guess that is the absence of a central database that captures all this information that is leading to that, and with the coming into operationalization of the national ID card system, I'm sure that many of these problems can be resolved.
Right.
Because you recall, Sam, that prior to our rising, we passed the resolution to approve the agreement between NIA and the private sector players who were going to work with the National ID Authority to roll out the issuance of the cards. All the enabling legislation has been dealt with, and so I believe that before the middle of this year we should see some traction in that space. With respect to the tin, I mean, I've had a tin for I can't remember, maybe 3-4 years.
You have a tin before?
Yes, I have a tin.
You don't have one now?
I do.
He's had.
Okay. I thought I had before.
I've had a tin. I mean, a tin number 4, 5 or so, or even more. I mean, and really, if we all, like Yao said, ought to abide by our constitutional obligations to pay taxes, then of course the Ghana Revenue Authority, which is tasked with collecting taxes for and on behalf of the state, ought to put in place measures that brings everybody into the tax net. And one of the things that they've sought to do is to issue this tax identification numbers. And the suggestion that I get people make is that in itself is a duplication, and of national ID. And I don't think so at all. Indeed, in America, where people have social security numbers, they still have tax identification numbers, because that is identification of taxpayers. So it's not a duplication. They serve different functions altogether. And so the fact that the national ID system has not been rolled out doesn't mean that the Ghana Revenue
No, but
Authority.
don't get it wrong. You're saying that it doesn't cover the multitude of Ghanaians.
But
the
it's
challenge.
a
what they
process.
seek to do.
It's a precondition.
It's a process. Yeah. The issue that you raised about passport and filing of cases, you and I pay taxes. That goes into paying the judicial service. So if you want to enjoy public goods and services, by all means, register as a taxpayer before you can access those services. Is that not fair and equitable?
But that's unconstitutional.
How
But
is
it's unconstitutional.
go to Supreme Court and challenge it? Where in the Constitution, which constitutional provision does that breach?
No, your ability to get
But
justice
nobody
in our
is
court,
denying you the
Subject to
ability
yes, please.
to assess the courts. All we are saying is that these courts are operated with funds that are provided for by the state. The state's funds is a contribution from all of us. You want to use the service, register and pay so you can use it. What's the issue?
But it doesn't have these identities, which are also preconditions.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. You see,
I have a problem.
you see,
whole
let's not mix the issues. So, you saying that before you ask people to register, because there is a requirement for identification, you should ensure that everybody has some form of identification before you ask them to go and register. But how are we going to know? So if you don't have an identification, say so.
But it's at the point that you're applying that it will come up.
If you don't have an identification,
And what happens
any
if you
shape
don't
or
have?
form,
What happens if you don't have?
then you have to take steps to procure it.
Exactly, and that's what Mr. Janto was saying,
And
that
you
it
can't
doesn't
procure it without
necessarily
it.
it doesn't necessarily help us achieve the objective, which is to
as if-
expand the
you
base.
see, we're making it look as if this is some straight jacket rule that is not subject to
Very well. Maybe it's
real challenges that you need to avert your mind to.
Yes.
These are real operational
But anyways,
challenges.
we need to take a break though.
But
Our
how
last
do we
break.
resolve the
please,
operational
Madam.
challenges when we don't start the operation?
So let's start and then work towards it.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that's a fair compromise. We can deal with that, yes. Let's take a break. When we come back, we move on to Commonwealth issues and matters pertaining to Sierra Leone and their elections. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back. This is Newday Saturday Edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7 and online at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. I'll be taking some messages and then we go to the Commonwealth Election Observer Mission that went to observe the Sierra Leonean elections. This message is coming in from, this is Sadat Bill Gates in Medina Estate. Okay. He says, good morning, Abner and your panelists. The president claims Ghana has not and will not provide a military base for the U.S. Meanwhile, everything contained in the agreement can be seen as not only a military base, but a detailed definition of it. So what is Mr. President talking about? The president cannot use an address to insult political opponents. He should know he was addressing the nation and not his opponents. More so, it is not only the NDC who are against the U.S.-Ghana agreement. The president felt he was doing us a favor by sending the document to Parliament. He forgot that if you stay in a glass house, you do not throw stones. The Gitmo 2 ruling that he says his party led took that privilege from him. That's Aram in Adenta News site. Good morning, TV3. We are citizens, not subjects. Ghana-US deal is uncalled for. President pay heed to the freedom and justice of Ghanaians. Just a reminder, Ghana is a sovereign state and we will not countenance any form of modern slavery. From Musa Rafael in Tamale says, I would have wished security issues like the one at hand be discussed by experts and not politicians. Politics is the only field Ghanaian professionals get involved and can't bring their professionalism to benefit the citizens. Tell me, when has any government in power ever cancelled any agreement with the US or with any other country? The opposition will make their noise, but the government in power will sign it. What happened when the NDC government was bringing in the Gitmo 2? How was the behavior of the NPP now in power? This one says, you don't need to be a magician to know this NDC MP is comfortably, speaking untruths, I would put it. They believe if they constantly do that, they can be taken as truth. But trust me, more Ghanaians are being educated now in this kind. Okay, I will just leave it at that. Thank you. AU Farouk in Tamale says, good morning to you, Abner, and your panelists. In fact, the president throws his anger on the opposition throughout his address. But that address will not stop us from demonstrating our displeasure towards the sale of Ghana to US. He says, Ghana first demonstration loading in Tamale. Really? Is that another one coming up we don't know about? Anyways, well, we don't have much time, so we'll just quickly move on to the Commonwealth Election Observer Mission and the duties in Sierra Leone. We do know that our former president, John Dramani Mahama, was the chairperson of that observer mission. And after the elections, we do know that the elections was held on the 7th of March, but then there was a runoff for the presidential race on the 31st of March. And after that runoff, we had this, I don't know if it's rumors or speculations or allegations going around that there had been some attempt by our former president to, be in league with the then opposition party, which is now the ruling party, to rig the elections. I mean, it's caused a lot of furore, I must say. The former president has categorically denied that. The Election Observer Mission is demanding an apology from the source, which we're told is the APC in Sierra Leone. The question is, how did we even get to this point? Mr. Mesa.
Well, I guess that rantings of a sour loser, if you ask me. I mean, Mr. Mahama has led several election observer missions across the continent. And of course, I mean, without, being in a position to confirm or deny the substantive allegations that were made, particularly with respect to his brother being the financier of one of the parties and all that. I mean, I fail to see what his interest would be, you know, in influencing the outcome of an election in Sierra Leone. You know, and so I guess that you know, the Commonwealth Observer Mission's call for an apology is in the right direction. If some investigation is required to be carried out, I think that will not be misplaced as well.
Do you think the government should back it up, perhaps, with the Commonwealth?
Of course. I mean, for me, he is the former president of this country. And he's an embodiment of our collective, you know, body politic. And so such allegations being leveled against him, I think, should commandeer the support of all of us to clear his name. You know, so yes, if it requires government to back him up in some way, shape or form, that would unravel the truth regarding the allegation and to, as it were, exonerate him. It wouldn't be a call that I would not support. You know, of course, some of these things we can't play politics with. You know, he's our former president, and we need to accord him the courtesies that he deserves. And so, when I heard the news and the posting of his passport and the allegation that you know, his passport has been cancelled in Sierra Leone
by a different state.
You know, but you see, the truth is,
how does that even happen?
That stamp is actually embossed in here by the passport office to show that a previous passport that he used had expired. You know, but you know, some of these things, social media, and some knows how some of these things are played out. And for me, when I see it, I just laugh and you know, dismiss it with the contempt it deserves.
Yes.
And so, you know, I think that we should all, as a people, be unified in our attempt to, as it were, defend our own, and to ensure that Mr. Mohammed's image and dignity is preserved, because it has bearing on all of us.
That's true. Great. Yeah. Quickly, I'll go to Mr. Pong on this, but also your view on how this affects observer missions moving forward, because I mean, this is terrible.
Well, I fully associate myself with Mr. Mensah, and also to say that I think maybe as an advice, that's if I qualify, Mr. President should, President Mahama, former president, may also avoid social media a bit, because Twitter, or is it Twitter?
Well, it depends on where you're coming from. So.
And this social media thing, you see, quote and unquote, with all due respect, there are a lot of faceless persons. People don't usually even use their identity. So when you also go there, it's like playing the dummy and still complaining that as a chief you've been insulted. So I would have wished that both himself, and recently he was complaining that some people have been unlawfully or without his permission, either using his Facebook page or address to put out some information that didn't emanate from him.
Right.
Since some people tried with me 4 years, I removed, and I've since not gone back there. I think he may have an official one where his team may be putting information there, but things that concern him personally, I think that it will be, in my own humble appeal, he may not have to put those things, or he may not even have one, if I were him, honestly, because you open yourself up, and people, all sorts of things.
Isn't it the case that people just have to be responsible?
Well, unfortunately, because
he's entitled
first
to
of
do
all,
that.
if they want to be, most of them would have put their true identity there.
Wow.
But because they just don't want to be, a lot of them, not everybody, so that I'm not. So I think that may be something that the collateral matter. But I would have also advised that maybe the representative for Sierra Leone should be called by the president or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to come and explain, because former President Mahama is there because he had been a former president of Ghana. I'm not sure they would have called me to go and be a member of.
You never know.
Yes. And because President Kufuor also had the opportunity, President Rawlings, I think, in the past as well. It's because he has been a former president who has peacefully allowed the transition, maybe not allowed, but facilitated transition, which truncated his own vision to be a second-term president. And you can't get it better than that. So I think that the state has an interest. It touches on us as well to call the representatives of Sierra Leone to come and explain why they allowed, or maybe some other diplomatic, not sanctions, but queries, or because this is done elsewhere. Look at the Russian UK thing. And let people understand that when you touch a person like that, as he said, you are touching a whole nation, because he represents us. It was a time President Kufuor, I think, even supported a certain appointment for President Mahama and all that. So let us not take this as a personal matter that touches on President Mahama alone. It affects all of us. And also, maybe he has also a duty, not by himself, but other persons whose name or association with some companies who have interest in that country have, if you like, fuel these things. To also, as much as possible, dissociate himself as he could, so that it can become a matter of a company's issue, maybe owned by a relative and not just him. I think most of these needless, if you like, allegations or involvement in these things may be reduced to the barest minimum. But then at the same time also, we have to be also careful that it can also happen to anyone. It happened to McMenu, and some people jubilated over it. So let us just stop it, that when a person is representing the people of Ghana, even as a group, one of the groups of the people of Ghana, let us all ensure that because our name, he's from Ghana, that alone is not good enough for us if it then brings out some allegation of something that is untold. So I think that otherwise, it is good that we pursue these things. President Mahama I think he has done well in the past, and maybe in this present one. In future, opportunities should be afforded him so that at least he can pursue it. But as he said, it's also an opportunity for all of us. When you lose an election, just go home and just pray to God that if you want another opportunity, perhaps he may give it. But then you are measured in what you say at the moment.
Very well. Mr. Gentwa.
I think as a country and citizens of this country, we should love ourselves more and not rejoice at any kind of information we get where we don't have the evidence. President Mahama wasn't only there as an ex-president. President Mahama was there as chair of the Commonwealth Observer Group to Sierra Leone. He was the one who was leading that mission with all the other ex-presidents and influential people who were part and parcel of that Commonwealth group. He's no mean person on the African continent. He's somebody who has ruled a country before, ruled the country Ghana before. And all of us should ask for the evidence to prove that he was interested in rigging the election. What is the use? I mean, what is he rigging Sierra Leone elections for? Why? What kind of benefit should he get from that? But the other thing we should be very mindful of is where we have relatives who have the wherewithal to do certain things. I think my dear friend, his brother, Ibrahim, should not have even gone close to financing a political party in Sierra Leone.
That's if the allegation is true.
Well, whatever the case is, your brother is in a very, very, very sensitive position. Very sensitive. And even in Ghana, wasn't the rumor that they were trying to rig the elections? The rumor was there. So there are certain things that you should not allow money to take your front, as the colloquial English would say. Money to take your front. you should look at, you know, its impact, not only on the individual, but on the country as a whole. I mean, if Ghana was that country where patriotism was strong, we should all rise up. Because when Sierra Leone was in a challenging position, it was Ghana they turned to. When Liberia was in a similar position, it was Ghana they turned to. Wia is now in Ghana, pleading that we come and help them. And you see, the thing is that it's West Africa. Even if it was East Africa or South Africa or North Africa, we might understand it. But West Africa, they are part of ECOWAS. They are part of us. If anything happens, like Ebola happened, we run to them. Although God being so good, we didn't suffer the effect of Ebola. But we were very concerned. Anything that happens on the West African coast within countries will affect each other. And so let's be very circumspect. For me, I would love that we call this opposition, and you know, they said a deputy minister. What about the substantive minister? What about the party chair of that party? What have they said? What have they done? Show us the evidence. And if it so happens that, yes, President Mahama is culpable, then we know what the next stage would be. So really, don't let us use this to play politics within our own country and turn it into a partisan thing. It will not help us anywhere. Thank you.
Very well, Honourable Sam George.
Well, let me state for the records that I was in Sierra Leone during the first round and during the runoff of these elections. And so I can speak with some level of first-hand knowledge of what happened in Sierra Leone. President Mahama, as leader of the Commonwealth Observer Mission or group to the Sierra Leonean election, was not alone there. He joined President Motlanthe of South Africa, who led the AU Observer Mission, and President Amos Sawyer of Liberia, who led the ECOWAS mission. President Goodluck Jonathan was also in there. And so at every point in time, you had 4 former African heads of state, both in the first round and in the second round.
Koroma too was there.
Koroma, yeah. No, but he's the sitting president. Ernest Bai Koroma is the sitting president. And so at several meetings, at several times there were meetings, but most of those meetings were led by or chaired by either Amos Sawyer, because he was the ECOWAS Observer Mission leader. And because this was an ECOWAS election, he always took the lead. And in most of those meetings, you will see that he would cede to President Mahama, because President Mahama had just come out of an election, and he had that position where his party had lost an election. He had overseen the transition. He could relate more to it. And so in the first round, President Mahama, I remember very well, the first round of the elections were held, I think, on the 7th of March. On the 28th of February, President Mahama led, in the first round, were 16 parties. He led all 16 parties to, for the first time, sign a peace accord to accept whatever the Electoral Commission will bring out. That is what led us to this election. Now, to have anybody suggest that President Mahama was involved in a rigging scheme is preposterous. My pain is that, yes, you can have ordinary people do it, but when you have people paid with our taxpayers' money, presidential staffers in the office of the president, lead the onslaught, that is unfortunate. And I can give you, I can show you screenshots, I can give you names of presidential staffers who did this. And that is why I'm saying,
they started the allegation.
Absolutely, I can read them out to you. They had screenshots. And
not exactly. For me, I think
no. If we're, you see, we shouldn't say they are not here to defend. Let's call people out for what they did wrong.
I think
this is public knowledge. If I mention a person's name and you go to his Facebook page and what I'm saying he did is not there, you know that I told
but you see, we need to be circumspect. I think that's the whole thing.
Yes,
but that's fine. But
we should be circumspect. It is fine for a presidential staffer who is paid with our taxes
Nobody's saying
to
it's
attack
fine.
the former president and peddle falsehood, put out a picture of his old passport that has been cancelled, and suggest that shows that he was deported. And, I mean, that fed into, even though unwittingly, it fed into the submission of
I think if what you're saying is true, there's a cause of action against such people, and I don't think it's for us to sit here to,
what happened to McMenu was that he was deported. John Mahama was not deported.
That's fine. I think let's.
You understand me?
Exactly. I'm trying. Honourable Sam George, I, as much as possible, try for this conversation to not get so partisan, and I think it's in good taste that we continue as such.
Unfortunately, I take the personal view.
No, that's fine. But whilst you're on the show, we would need to, you know, adhere to certain principles and values. I mean, it's not every time that you need to come here and state the ground rules, but really we just need to be circumspect. These persons you're going to mention, I mean, they're not here to defend themselves, and I don't want to allow this platform to be used for that purpose.
I don't have a problem with you setting the ground rules.
Please.
And I would respect the ground rules. I choose to respect the ground rules. That's why I choose to appear on your show. But that will not stop me from espousing my personal opinion, which is that presidential staffers paid with government taxpayers' money led this onslaught on a former president. And I think that it is distasteful, and I think that the presidency itself must call its own staff to order. Because you cannot tell me that the very people who put out the president's information put out this information, and there is no mechanism in the Flagstaff House. I've sat in the Flagstaff House to monitor what they do. You understand me? And so if you say that this is partisan,
again,
information.
And you need to distinguish. We need to distinguish.
Is that private citizen not a presidential staffer? So did he not do it during working hours?
That deprives him of his right to put out whatever he wants.
Look,
I think we can carry on with the conversation. Your point is well made.
Somebody makes a post.
Your point is well made.
12:12 in the afternoon. 12 p.m., 12 minutes past 12 noon.
That
wasn't not working hours.
But what's he doing?
On the same, look at that. On the same page, on the same Facebook page and handle that he uses to propagate the president's information earlier in the morning.
Was that an official page?
It is the person's official page.
That's the person's thing. So please don't.
What are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that if the person is a presidential staffer? No, let me ask you a question. I've been a presidential staffer.
I don't answer questions here.
Well, fine. I'm asking you rhetorically. I've been a presidential staffer before. There have been times when I have been questioned for my posts when I was a presidential staffer. So why are we changing or shifting the poll now? When a presidential staffer uses his personal page to propagate official government business, you take it as official government business. You take it as legitimate. When he uses that same page to attack a former president, we are saying that it is his private page.
We need to move on to
Commonwealth. And you see, the last thing I'll say, the last thing I'll say, is the suggestion that President Mahama should avoid Twitter. Again.
I didn't say.
Oh no. Okay.
I said, if I may advise
that's his.
Please. You don't just twist what people say.
And I'm reacting to that opinion.
Don't I have the right?
I mean, all I can say is that President Mahama is a very tolerant politician. He would tolerate all shades of opinion. If people choose to be disrespectful to him because he's using a platform that your uncle, as you refer to him, Donald Trump, uses very often. And you think that John Mahama should not put it out? Well, he's very tolerant. He's not going to come and be condescending to those who express divergent opinions on his Twitter page. But I think that in today's world of politics,
even complain. People are using this because
no. What he complained about is people using and creating fake accounts. Members of Parliament. How many times have members of Parliament not had even their accounts cloned and used, fake accounts used? Even the President Akufo-Addo, how many times have we not seen fake accounts come up in his name? So those are things that happen. That in itself should not stop any politician from saying they will use social media. The bottom line here is that, and the last point is that the allegation that the President's brother was involved in financing a party, again, is unfounded. It is false, and Sierra Leoneans on the ground, the ordinary, what I'm putting on record here is that a majority of Sierra Leoneans on the ground are grateful to President Mahama for his service to them. His intervention during the Ebola response, his intervention at Goodrich during the elections.
George, quickly, let me come in here. These allegations, or this allegation, is coming from Sierra Leone. I think we need to get that straight.
And amplified by persons in our Flagstaff house.
But if somebody makes an allegation,
we're not mixing anything up.
Yes, so clearly this allegation is coming from Sierra Leone.
Yes.
Republication of material is what? What is that? Republication of defamatory material is not defamatory.
So sue him.
Can we? That's
what are you talking about?
Go to court.
You're a lawyer. Let's be careful the things we say. In wrapping up, if a deputy minister of information in Sierra Leone, in a governing party that came second in the first round, so clearly was trailing behind the opposition party, goes to court to actually stop the runoff and gets the runoff postponed for 4 days, because they were challenging the Electoral Commission, and goes ahead to lose the second round. that clearly shows you a track record of a political party in itself that had issues going into that election. They're looking for a scapegoat. They want to make President Mahama the scapegoat, and I think it is despicable that presidential staffers paid with our taxpayers' money will take unfounded allegations and run with them to tarnish the reputation of a president of this country.
Very well. I mean, I guess on that note, we can bring conversations to a close. It's just about some 5 minutes or so to the end of the show, which is at 9:50. But I think we have some few minutes, so we can just touch on the 2018 Commonwealth Games, which, I mean, we heard some rather unpleasant news coming from there. 50 persons or so gone there or went there and, you know, under the guise of being journalists. And the part that is worrying is the fact that they had been cleared from here or given accreditation. And that's the worrying part by certain authorities here, the Ghana Olympic Committee, we hear, and all of that. I mean, this is quite a worrying story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's embarrassing. And if the story holds some truth, I think that the officials involved should be held accountable. I've read a story attributed to the deputy minister who's indicated that some investigation is being conducted to unravel whatever it is that caused this situation to arise, and I support that investigation. People should be held accountable for their actions.
But is it the case that they are not journalists because they don't have certificates?
I don't know. GIJ. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
It's one of the areas that we need to.
So it's important that we investigate to see what it is.
Journalists are accustomed to do, but they are not journalists. I mean, what we are all doing here is journalism, but we are not journalists. So are we saying that because they are not members of the Ghana Journalists Association, or that they don't have certificates from GIJ, so they are not journalists?
Well, it's yet to come out. Those fine details,
yes,
those fine details are yet to come out.
As if, who is a journalist?
But that's why it's important for this matter to be investigated, so that the real issues come out, and whoever was either culpable or didn't do their job, that something happens. Mr. Johnson,
I'm just wrapping up.
Sorry, yes.
You know, I may have to do what Sam did earlier. I mean, to attribute, persons who ostensibly work in the office of or at the presidency to be, using taxpayers' money to disparage the image of the former president, I think it's unwarranted. I mean, I sat here, I've read the social media posts, I've read the stories, and I roundly condemned anybody who seeks to, so don't let it seem as if this trolling, if you like, of Mr. Mahama with this allegation is something that has been officially sanctioned. Because people, we have, but it's important that, we put some of these things in their proper perspective. And it's unfortunate.
I'll just move to Mr. Dantua for your perspective on the
encourage these
2018 Commonwealth Games.
It's a shame such a thing should happen. And I think we've got to a stage in this country where we need to be able to categorize who is what and who does what. There's so many people who come up and say they are journalists and they are not journalists. They come and, and probably it's because of lack of adequate jobs in the system for them to do. They need to find something to do. Now, it's a huge embarrassment for the country Ghana for such a thing to happen. The whole wide world has heard it. This is Commonwealth Games, which has just a club of countries. Yes, yes. It's a club, and we would have thought that we would be concentrating on the games itself and not these types of things. I think it is time that we are able to section those who we take out there as representing our country. If they are journalists, they need to have the right accreditation as journalists, so that when they get to the visa counter and they ask, what's your profession, they can prove what it is.
Very well. Honourable Sam Judge,
yes, I think that's, well, again, sad reportage for our country as a whole on the international scene, because earlier this week, it was the first and trending story on BBC Focus on Africa. I mean, it brings and paints our country in bad light. I think that a full-scale investigation into this matter must be had, where culprits are identified, because clearly there was a chain of command. There was a process by which this gentleman got accreditation, were part of a government or part of the Ghana delegation, to Australia. It is my understanding that even post the deportation of the 50 gentlemen and women, you've had issues where there are issues about the Ghana Deaf and Dumb team who
was
have gone there.
time.
In 2009, the Ghana Deaf and Dumb team went there and they were singing Jama and all of that. And that had led to this issue. Again, there are reports which, and that's the more reason why we need to have this investigation, because some reports are saying that 8 of the individuals, and this was a report carried on a sister radio station, I think, 8 of the individuals are known party activists from the Eastern region. And so we need to identify who these are, identify who they paid monies to, and make sure that the culprits are really dealt with.
Very well. On that note, we just have to bring conversations to a close here. This is all the time we have for today's discussions. It's been an interesting time here. Thank you so much for making a date with us, but also thank you to my panelists, Mr. Yao Pong and the Honorable Andrew Ejapamesa, Mr. Kwame Jantwa and the Honorable Sam George. We'll be back next week, same time. Have a good weekend. Bye.